Released in 2010, Split Second, or Split Second Velocity as it's known in Europe for reasons that are probably legal, is an action racing game developed by the now defunct BlackRock Studios and published by the not technically defunct Disney Interactive Studios. It's often confused with and compared to Blur, a game made by the similarly defunct but amazing developer Bizarre Creations and published by the definitely not defunct Activision, which is hardly surprising given that they were released within a week of each other and both have arcadey gameplay with realistic environments and vehicles. Both games were quite well received, and both were the last games their respective studios ever made. BlackRock's only other effort, the trick-based ATV Racer Pure, was a great game hindered by a title that placed it squarely in the great four-letter driving game influx of the late 2000s, an influx that included Pure, Blur, Grid, Dirt, Fuel, and Cars? Anyway, Split Second received good reviews for the PS3, 360 and PC version. The Sumo Digital developed PSP version didn't do so well, which is surprising because A, Sumo made the actually very good and definitely not 4 letters long Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform, and B, they're still in business so they probably know what they're doing. However, the good reviews only translated into modest sales, and the lack of a remaster, sequel, or backwards compatibility with the current consoles mean that many might not know why Split Second is still worth playing today. So, in no particular order, here are 5 reasons why Split Second is awesome, and a couple of reasons why it isn't. Number 1. Powerplays. Split Second's biggest selling point is its power plays, which are essentially explosions or shortcuts which are achieved at the push of a button. To earn enough power to trigger these explosions, you need to fill the meter below your car by drifting, drafting, jumping and dodging opponents' power plays, similar to how you would fill the boost meter in a Burnout game. 1 or 2 bars earns you the right to use level 1 power plays, which range from buildings exploding and helicopters dropping bombs, to bridges collapsing and wrecking balls flying across the screen. However, just because you've earned the power plays doesn't mean you'll be wrecking opponents straight away. You'll still need to time it properly. Get it wrong and you run the risk of wrecking yourself. Fill up a 3rd bar and you can use level 2 power plays, which include dump trucks smashing through bridges and entire mountains blowing up. Or you can spend it all on a route changer, which brings us nicely to number 2. Track defamation. Without a doubt, Split Second's most spectacular set pieces are its route changes, destructive events that alter the course of the track for the remainder of the race while likely destroying several opponents in the process. Highlights include entire dams being demolished into the ocean, space needles collapsing and destroying the road below, and planes falling out of the sky and skidding along a runway. The majority of the tracks have route changes, and some can only be activated after a route change has already happened. But Split Second is a long game, and more on that towards the end of the video, so you're likely to see them all more than once during a complete playthrough. Number 3. The difficulty. If your game doesn't have easy, medium, hard difficulty levels, then you need to make sure you strike a delicate balance between accessibility and a challenge. Fortunately, for the most part, Split Second does this with aplomb. Only the most skilled player might consider the campaign to be easy, but outside of a couple of the detonator challenges, there are very few events that are frustratingly hard to win. There's definitely AI rubber banding at play here, but to be honest it just contributes to more tense finishes and action-packed races, rather than annoying computerized comeback. Besides, if you drive a clean race, you will more than likely finish first, regardless of what the other drivers get up to. The AI's use of power plays is also outstanding. While it's obviously great fun to rain down the pain on your rivals, they also use their fair share of explosions themselves, including the route changes. The vast majority of these power plays are dodgeable too, just don't go through any petrol stations unless you really need to. Number 4. The events. Now Split Second only has 5 different event types during its lengthy single player campaign, and 2 of them, Race and Eliminator, aren't exactly worlds apart. The former is an 8 player 2 or 3 lap race to the finish, and the latter takes place on the same courses, and every 30 seconds the last place driver is eliminated from the race, which essentially just removes potential power play victims. However, the other 3 modes more than make up for this. The hardest of these is Detonator, a single lap against the clock while all manner of power plays are automatically triggered as you drive. It's a great way to see more unusual power plays and route changes that aren't often triggered in the race-based modes. The challenge doesn't really lie in avoiding these power plays, rather it's in beating a target time that would be hard to top even without all of the destruction. There's also Air Revenge, in which the player has to evade missiles from a helicopter in order to build up enough juice to deflect said missiles back at the chopper to defeat it. Not entirely sure how a car changes the course of missiles while they're in mid-air, but it looks cool so I'll let it slide. Lastly, there's Survival, which involves the player chasing down and overtaking big rigs while they're dropping explosive barrels all over the place. This time the carnage comes from the random cars littered across the road, which serve as fodder for the big rigs barrels and as a shield for the player. As well as providing a welcome break from the race events, these challenges enable the player to explore Split Second's array of unlicensed vehicles. The larger and stronger 4x4s probably won't win you any races, but they will stop you from getting buffeted by the onslaught of explosions. Meanwhile, the nimble sports cars will help you dominate a detonator lap, but don't be surprised if you don't last too long in a survival event. Number 5. The presentation. So, Split Second's premise is that the whole thing is a reality TV show, but outside of brief videos at the start and end of each chapter and a campaign ending in which a sequel is teased but will obviously never arrive, there's not much to suggest that this is the case. The game is awesome because of the way it looks during actual gameplay, which, outside of a barely noticeable split-second bug in the corner of the screen, is free of any reality TV trappings. During races, there's no map, which would be constantly changing anyway, no speedometer, no rear view mirror, no gear display. The only information you need is given to you directly behind your vehicle. This leaves more room for unobstructed destruction and defamation on the peripheries rather than any telemetric nonsense that you might get from a simulation game. It's definitely showing signs of age in 2017, but Split Second is still a good looking game despite the 30 frames per second cap, even on PC. The crashes look devastating, slick optional slow motion replays accompany every productive power play, and the route changes never fail to impress. These 5 factors all contribute to a fantastic game, but it's not perfect. There's also the length. There's no getting around it. Split Second's single player campaign is long. It has 12 chapters of 6 races, so that's 72 events with only 5 variations. And as fun as these variations are to play, and as fun as the power plays are to trigger, there's not enough to stave off the feeling that Split Second is outstaying its welcome towards the end. A lack of track variety doesn't help. There are 11 named tracks, which is by no means a bad number, but many share environments, power plays, and even actual parts of the course. Storm Drain and Power Plant have similar sections. Ferry Wharf and Port Bridge share their shortcuts, while Airplane Graveyard and Canyon are setting the same orange environment. It's all well and good creating a sense of place by including nods to different tracks and environments, but when you have 72 events to play through, there is a definite fatigue towards the end of the campaign. It's no fun in first. So the idea of a race is to win it, but the fun of Split Second is using power plays, which you can only trigger when someone's ahead of you. It's a problem that power-up racers have had for years, but at least games like Mario Kart have mines that can be used on opponents behind you, or boost powers that can be used regardless of your position in the race. You can drift and jump all you like to build up your meter, but with no one to use it on, there really isn't any point. The aforementioned rubber banding and the game's challenge and difficulty ensure that this doesn't happen too frequently, but it's hard to ignore that games like these don't exactly reward the player for doing incredibly well. But Split Second is still well worth checking out. It's available to download on the PS3 PSN store and Steam, and with Black Rock's Pure already on the list of Xbox One 360 backwards compatible titles, we're hoping that Split Second will join it soon.